All right, let's get to Purdue. Let's get to Purdue for a few minutes because I want to hear a discussion between both of you guys on the Boilermakers. You both have seen them a ton this year. I think we wrote them off a little bit, probably a month or so ago, not having them as a Final Four contender. Has that changed in your eyes, Chris? And why, if it has?
I think when they went through that stretch, what they lose those road games. I was very suspicious of where this was going to go. Right, I always knew you give Coach Painter through Christmas break. Normally, after that Christmas break, they start to ascend and start to really improve. Um, with the change of Caleb first coming into the starting lineup has given Purdue an identity that they didn't have at the beginning. Now I think defensively they're dictating more um, and just being far more aggressive, letting Braden Smith kind of play free safety and letting his instincts take over, which in return is getting them steals and getting them in transition for easy baskets and wide open threes, which when they weren't dictating and they weren't getting these turnovers and getting these easy opportunities in transition, which made the game a lot harder for them. Um, what happens when a team comes out and like Marquette did or Penn State and picks them up and just pressures the shit out of them? That's my question mark that I have for them. But do they have the talent to, depending who they play, where they play, when they play them, to make a Final Four run again? I think they have the capability of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a dominant team. Like that's the one we just saw that with Auburn against Florida, right? Everybody had them as clearly number one. Rob, they lose. I've been saying it all year. Like they're really good. Don't get me wrong. They're really good. Alabama's really good. Duke's really good. But I don't think the gap is there's not that UConn from last
Yeah.
or 2 years ago, the second half of the year, UConn.
Or even Purdue from last year. I mean, if
I mean,
UConn doesn't exist, I think Purdue is
yes.
is above everybody else in last year's
Right.
season. I agree with Chris, and honestly, I told Coach Painter this at a shoot around that I was at for the Indiana game, that watching C.J. Cox guard and Jakari Harris guard reminds me of what we used to do when we were there, where it'd be Chris picking the ball up, or it'd be Keaton picking the ball up, or Lewis Jackson doing that. And man, I watched the Michigan tape tonight because I have the game tomorrow. Chris said this: Purdue is dictating defensively, and now there's certain matchups that aren't as easy to dictate. USC showed that. Wesley Yates goes for 30. Like the guys that can just go elite speed, elite scores, that's still going to be a problem. There isn't rim protection. It's scheme based the way that they have guarded. They don't have Zach Edey to clean that stuff up back there. But with that being said, Paul Lusk and Terry Johnson deserve a ton of credit because those dudes have been awesome with Purdue's defense. And I think they also, the players, the coaching staff, everybody deserves a lot of credit because after the Auburn game, like Chris said, this could have went, the paths were diverging. And they certainly took the path of, all right, we're going to be tougher. Caleb First is going to help us. And Caleb has played so much better. He's playing with a lot of confidence. He's a versatile defender. But it is, it's amazing to see the way that they've been able to dictate things with ball pressure, with physicality, with scheme. And on top of that, Trey Kaufman runs play like an All-American, and Braden Smith's the best point guard in college basketball. So
yeah, and it's
that's a pretty good formula.
I think all of us thought it was going to be like Colvin or Heidi that had to make the jump. That was like the preseason, right? Everybody. I think all of us are saying that. That's going to be the X factor. That's the key. You knew what you're get out of Braden. Fletcher's been Fletcher for the most part, right? Like he's kind of been.
He's had a great year. Third scorer, shoots it at a high clip. He's been great.
Obviously, I think Trey's been better than we all thought. He's been better from an offensive standpoint. When you watch Braden, Chris, like I say, other than there's Cooper Flagg, I think is at a different level this year than everybody else. But I don't think Braden's that far behind now. And I think obviously you're talking about a couple, Janai Broom, Cooper Flagg, Cam Jones, Braden Smith. Those are the four guys that I think are locks right now as first team All-Americans. When you watch them, what jumps out the most? Because he's he is so much fun to watch because he doesn't really like. He's tough. He's everything you want, kind of in a Purdue point guard.
No, 100% he is. And I think the thing that jumps out to me is his unselfishness. I would say he's patiently aggressive sometimes. If you hedge him, he's going to hit that pocket pass and let Trey Kaufman just go to work from there. But he has his kill zones, right? If he gets to that 15-foot, leaner, he gets to the baseline for the leaner, those are kind of his kill zones. And he's added that three-point shot and shooting it at a much higher clip, much more consistent than he was the year previously. People aren't going under anymore. The thing with Braden that I think is from playing overseas and playing point guard is when people consistently high hedge, and Iowa took away the pocket pass sometimes. They stole it, they deflected it, is what is that next option? You can't always out-dribble the big, string it out, and try to play. Where does that quick pass and letting somebody else make the next play? That would be my next, I guess, progression for him is trusting.
That's hard for point guards, Chris. That's hard.
I know.
Those are no more assists.
But I think that's the next progression is hitting Fletcher on the strong side or the backside and then letting those guys hit Trey Kaufman and then play from there when teams do high hedge and are really aggressive, which I think is, what else are you going to do with him? You can pressure him, you can do all of that, but you've got to get the ball out of his hands because he's scoring at will and averaging, 10 assists a game. You kind of got to pick your poison. So.
Do you guys think Payne is, I'm looking it up right now, how old? I think he's around my age. Yeah,
he's 54.
He's 54, so he's older than me. Just so you know, I want that on the record, Rob. He's older than me.
God, he looks so much better than you, though.
He does look better than me. Everybody looks better than me.
You walked into that one. That one.
Screw you. How much longer do you think Payne is like an Izzo type where he's just going to coach forever? He's got hobbies. We know that. He loves to go to the Cubs games. He's very well-rounded and can talk about anything. But do you think he's a guy that's just – or do you think the sport, because of what's going on with NIL, because of what's going on with it being harder to retain guys, he's been able to do it. Okay, he's been able to do it and be fortunate so far. But that's not going to continue. We know it can't.
Mm-hmm.
How much longer do you think he goes, Chris, with the current climate the way it is?
I'm unsure. I will say the thing that I really appreciate about Coach Painter is how much he delegates to his staff and lets them kind of, PJ runs the offense, Paul and Terry on the defense. You have Sasha, working on sideline out of bounds and underneath out of bounds, just giving those guys the confidence and trust to go out there and, obviously, he's a top dog. He has this, say in everything, but giving those guys the freedom to go out there and do that. But with the new landscape, I don't know. I don't think NIL, I say, affects Purdue, but it doesn't affect Purdue like it's going to affect other schools. For Coach Painter's recruiting people that fit the system, that he's not worried about stars, rank, any of that stuff. He's going after people that are going to fit. And, they're getting pretty good money to come, and you're coming into the culture, you're coming into winning. Is it going to sustain where nobody transfers? Probably not. But, you're going to go and keep getting those same guys. Maybe you have to get into the portal, depending on what you're looking for. But I could see him staying for, another 10 years. He's at that point. He's very comfortable. He has a great life at, coaching at his alma mater. So, it's really just, whatever he feels. And if, he gets to a point where that he just is ready to be done and just, go and enjoy life without basketball and having all of the responsibilities of a coach.
Hey, Rob, an Indiana fan told me today, I was on campus in Bloomington, and they said Indiana, as you guys know, like his whole family went to Indiana. They should offer him like $10 million just to make Purdue have to pony up and pay like $11 million to keep not paying. It's actually kind of smart in a way, right? Like if you're Indiana,
just totally screw your rival.
Yes.
Yeah.
In a way, it would be smart.